Meet the Candidate Series. The Arc of Pennsylvania hosts an interview of Emily Kinkead, candidate for Allegheny County's 20th House District, by Liz Humphrey, self advocate and board member of the Arc of Greater Pittsburgh. The Meet the Candidates series is an opportunity for individuals with disabilities and their families to hear from candidates on disability issues. Candidates from all parties have been invited to participate in the series. The Arc of Pennsylvania and the Arc of Greater Pittsburgh are nonpartisan organizations and do not endorse political candidates.
The Arc of Pennsylvania welcomes you to the first interview in our Meet the Candidate series. The candidate series is focused on open seats where there is not an incumbent running for re-election in Pennsylvania's General Assembly. The interviews are being conducted by self-advocates and is part of the ARC's focus on developing leaders within the disability community. I'm going to turn this over to Nancy Murray, president of the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh, who will be introducing Liz Humphrey. Nancy?
Thank you, Sherry. It is my honor to introduce Liz Humphrey. Liz is a brand new board member here at the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh. Liz is an inspirational speaker. She is an advocate for all people with all types of disabilities. She's an active member of quite a few self-advocacy groups, including our new self-advocacy group here at Achieva, which is called Empowered Voices. Liz has also taken a course that's called Competence and Confidence Policy, Partners in Policy Making through the Disability Rights of Pennsylvania. And Liz has also participated in rallies at the state capitol on behalf of direct support professionals. So again, it's my honor to introduce Liz. Liz, we're gonna let you kick it off with your first question for Emily.
Sure. Okay, here we go. What do you think Pennsylvania should do to assist families and caregivers of people with disabilities?
So I really appreciate being here. Thank you. I spent a year living and working in a community called L'Arche in Greater Washington, D.C., which is actually French for the Arc, but not associated. But I think that, you know, there's a sort of, you know, line of a through line of understanding that, you know, we need to center people who have disabilities and not, you know, segregate them out of the community at large. They need to be, you know, centered in the community. And so that year that I spent working at L'Arche really informed a lot of my understanding of disability policy and my willingness to kind of work with it moving forward. So what I would like to do is really make sure that when we are making policy in Pennsylvania around people with disabilities, around their caregivers, that we are having at the table people who, like you, who are self-advocates, who are able to say, this is what I need, and this is what I want, and this is what is important to me, rather than making decisions for people. I think that is really what Pennsylvania needs to be doing in terms of disability policy and supporting caregivers and supporting people who have disabilities, is empowering them through the law to advocate for themselves and to be able to take a stand to say, this is what I need and this is how you can give it to me.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What investments will you make in expanding long-term services and supports in the community for people with disabilities?
I think one of the first, you know, supports, if you will, that we need to address is minimum wage for people with disabilities. That is critical to ensuring that people who have disabilities have the ability to take care of themselves in the community and are not reliant on others. The appallingly low minimum wage that's offered to people with disabilities is something that we have to rectify, and we need to do it yesterday. So that is one of the first priorities that I have. In terms of, supports in the community, I think that we need to be a lot more vocal and a lot more, kind of present in terms of what services are offered already and how can you access them. How are, what is available to caregivers, what is available to families, what is available to the individuals, and building up those supports. The community that I worked for, L'Arche, was very unique in the sense that everyone who worked there lived in the community with the people that we served, and it was a really different experience in that you shared life with the people that we were taking care of. And so it wasn't, residents and staff, it was very much a family. And I think we need to build up more supports that make more people comfortable being around people with disabilities. The disability isn't some kind of a strange animal. And I think in a lot of ways, the supports that are available will become much more natural.
Okay. Next question. How will you work to address the district support professional crisis, the direct support professional crisis? Sorry about that.
Oh, sure. I think that similar to the nursing crisis and our teaching crisis, it's all about investing in those in that profession and making sure that it is apparent that we value people who serve in those roles, that we have I think that raising the minimum wage is helpful, but also providing more government support to organizations that hire direct support professionals, to ensure that they are able to actually pay the wages that would keep people in those roles. There are a lot of people that are very caring, and I think we lose a lot of those people to other positions because it's very hard to pay them what they're worth. And I think that similar to nursing, and with nursing burnout, it's a similar issue where we need to value people and we need to give people the supports that they need in their profession.
Okay. How will you work against the needless institutionalization of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
I think it largely comes down to information about, just because someone has a disability doesn't mean that person should be packed away in a place that's outside of the community. We have seen the absolute horrors that have resulted from having institutions where we just throw people away, and the lack of care and the lack of interest. There have been multiple class action suits that have established that you can't do that, but we still don't have the investment from the state to be able to do that. And I think that as somebody who worked with people who were on the other end of treatment and institutionalization in that capacity, I am acutely aware of the fact that we can't do that anymore. And so I will absolutely advocate for more home-based, community-based supports and housing for people with intellectual disabilities.
Okay. Next question. What steps will you take to reduce the risks of crimes committed against people with disabilities?
I think we need to raise the level of severity of punishment people who, I mean, we protect police officers, we protect people who, you know, drive buses. I think that people with disabilities, people who have a unique vulnerability to being the victim of crime, just, you know, by the jobs that they have, or the need that they have to be cared for by someone else. You know, we need to step up our protection of them and make it create more severe punishments, make it an aggravating aspect, that if you commit a crime against a person with a disability, then you know, it's an aggravating factor in sentencing. I think the other thing is to really invest in making sure that we properly vet people. And I think this goes back to, you know, the direct support professional crisis, that you know, we are allowing the people who are really truly invested in caring for people in a good way and making sure that things are good, and allowing them to leave the profession because we're not investing in those people. And in that capacity, it is a lot of times people who are put in the positions to care for people with disabilities, you know, are not necessarily the best qualified.
All right. What steps will you take to ensure the education system in Pennsylvania meets the needs of all children, especially those with disabilities?
I think we're seeing right now that Pennsylvania is not doing that, especially because of, you know, with the shutdown, you know, a lot of students with IEPs are not receiving the kinds of supports that they need, and it was very much forgotten in the shutdown of you know, let's educate children, but we're not considering how each individual student learns. And I think that we need to be very cognizant of the needs of students now through the shutdown, and how students are learning, and whether or not they're receiving the supports that they need with their IEPs, and how we can address that. I think that we need to be a lot more cognizant of it. And admittedly, I don't know what the answer to that question is. I don't know how to, you know, solve that problem. It's an ongoing issue, but it's something that, you know, because I am aware of it, I can do more to learn about it and to advocate for solutions. And I think that ultimately it is the stakeholders within the disability community who should be leading the charge on how we're addressing that issue.
Okay. Last question. What steps will you take to expand access to the general education classroom and achieve broader inclusion for students with disabilities?
I think that students with disabilities, I mean, when I was in school, I very rarely interacted with a lot of the students that had disabilities, you know, or obvious, I guess, disabilities to me. You know, periodically they would show up in one of my classes, and then I wouldn't see them again for months. And that is unacceptable. You know, those students are entitled to friends. They're entitled to developing relationships with everyone. That is part of school as well. And, you know, again, I don't have the answer to that question. I know that students with disabilities require, you know, special supports, and sometimes, you know, it requires them to be in a different classroom. But at the same time, we do need to be doing more to integrate students with disabilities into everyday classrooms. It's a, you know, it's not just for the benefit of the students with disabilities, it's also for the benefit of students without disabilities, because we have a responsibility as, you know, able-bodied people, as abled people, to learn about disabilities and realize that it is it is just a different aspect of humanity. It is not a fault or a flaw or some kind of disease or something that is scary. And it took me far too long in my life to get comfortable around people who had disabilities. And I would like to work actively to make sure that no one is in their 20s before they're, you know, comfortable around people with disabilities and realize people with disabilities are just people.
Okay. Now I said that was the last question, but it's not. I have one more for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
No, please ask away.
What ways will you promote meaningful employment opportunities in your district for individuals with disabilities?
I think as we move forward, particularly with this recovery from the shutdown, we have a great opportunity to really design the kind of future that we want. And I think that it is also, it is inclusive of people with disabilities. It is making sure that if you are going to receive funds for, coronavirus shutdown recovery, if the state is going to be sending you any kind of assistance, or the federal government as well is sending you any kind of assistance to recover your business, that part of that should be, an incentive to hire, marginalized individuals from marginalized communities. So, people of color, women, people with disabilities, and that as we are investing more money in trying to recover from this, I expect that a lot of the recovery will also be a little bit of what we saw, around the recovery from the Great Depression, which was an investment in infrastructure and investment in arts to be able to just get people back to work. And that if we are going to make those kinds of investments, then they need to be, one, accessible to people with disabilities, and two, that the jobs need to have an aspect where we prioritize hiring people with disabilities if the job is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz, thank you for asking all of those great questions. Emily,
You're welcome.
did you have anything else that you wanted to say, kind of to sum up your interview?
Sure. I really appreciate, again, being a part of this, being the first. I didn't realize that I was the first person to be interviewed in this way. I think that there's a lot of need to really have thoughtful leaders in our state legislature, in our federal legislature, who are going to always consider, how are the decisions that I am making impacting people with disabilities in the disability community? Because I think that for far too long, we have left that as an afterthought. I think the shutdown has acutely demonstrated that we shut things down and we provided assistance to folks. And then after the fact, we realized we're not providing assistance to students who have disabilities. We're not supporting them with their IEPs. We're not providing assistance at the level that we need to caregivers and persons with disabilities who are now finding themselves in a radically different world with radically fewer supports than they had previously. And we can't do that whenever there's a crisis. We have to make sure that every decision that we make, even if it is a quick decision that needs a quick turnaround, we need to be thoughtful in the way that we do it to ensure that every person in Pennsylvania is considered in the decision that we make. And that is what I am dedicated to doing. And so I look forward to working with you guys with the ARC, and hoping that you guys hold me accountable in Harrisburg, and let me know if there is something that a decision that I can make that will help, or a decision that I have made that was not helpful.
So I just want to thank you, Emily, for joining us today. I wanted to let everyone know that you are running to represent Pennsylvania's 20th State House District, which includes parts of Allegheny County. Ms. Kinkead is an attorney and a lifelong advocate. Her service includes advocating for persons with disabilities, lobbying for public financing of elections, gerrymandering, reform, and responsive climate change policy. You've also worked in the Legislative Policy Office at the National Institutes of Health and provided legal aid to vulnerable individuals. So I want to thank you so much. This was a great way to kick off our series. And if we at the ARC of Pennsylvania or the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh can ever be assistance, a sounding board for issues affecting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, please reach out anytime. But thank you again, Emily. It was a pleasure.